I think it's so important that we recognize that we attract what we are. And I don't necessarily mean that in a direct sense, in that, like, oh, if you're an arrogant person, then you just attract arrogant people towards you. But I mean in the circumstance that you almost attract what you think you deserve. So, in a circumstance where you have a low self esteem, in this circumstance where you have a low self worth, you'll end up just attracting situations, circumstances, and events that almost fortify that thought, that reinforce that thought, rather than circumstances that serve to change that thought. When I say that you attract what you are, I mean in the sense that the way that you see yourself and the way that you feel, the way that you see the world, all of those things are so important. Because ultimately, the things that end up sticking, the things that you end up attracting like a magnet towards yourself, are the ones that reinforce those ideas that you already have, that reinforce the feelings that you have about the world, the way that you feel about yourself. So I think that in trying to change anything, any circumstances that we continually find ourselves in, any level of redundancy in the lives that we live, and potentially not having the things that we truly want to have, it's first about changing the way that you see the world. It's about changing the way that you feel about the world. It's about changing the way that you see and feel about yourself. And in doing that, it's almost like changing the polarity of yourself. And by doing that, you end up changing the things that you attract in your life, the things that end up sticking and remaining in your life. Because, this is just the example I was thinking about earlier today. But someone that has a high self-esteem, that has a high self-worth, they may encounter circumstances where almost the idea of having a low self-worth is presented to them. But that's not what's going to stick. It's not what's going to remain within their lives. Because you attract what you are. A person with a high self-esteem, a person with a high self-value, a high self-worth is not going to attract circumstances, situations, and events that try to reinforce that they actually don't have a high self-worth. Instead, they have a low self-worth. But it's almost about the emotional conviction that you put towards those thoughts. And that's why I said it's so important that you change the way that you see the world and the way that you feel about the world, as well as the way that you see yourself and the way that you feel about yourself. Because your thoughts, you can think anything at any point in time, but you can only truly feel one thing. Almost in the sense that your feelings don't truly lie to you. But that's not in the circumstance that we can't change our feelings, but it's that our feelings are more authentic to ourselves than our thoughts. Because right now, I could think any thought that I ever wanted. Right now, I could think anything. I could imagine anything. So it's almost about changing your feelings, changing the way that you feel about the world, changing the way that you feel about yourself so that it aligns with the thoughts that you want to have. So, for example, if you have a low self-esteem, if you have a low self-worth, and you no longer align with that, that's no longer who you want to be, then it's about thinking first and seeing yourself and seeing the world as if you did have a high value, as if you did have a high self-worth, if you did have a high self-esteem, and then aligning your emotions with that. Because you could feel anything that you want at any point in time. If you imagine a negative situation and you start feeling sad, that's you controlling the way that you feel. And conversely, if you imagine a positive situation and you start to feel joy, you start to feel peace, then that's also you controlling how you feel. So the way that you feel, it doesn't need to be something that's a result, and that's a consequence of the world around you. But rather, the world around you is a direct consequence of the way that you feel and the way that you think. So when trying to change any physical circumstances that you find yourself in, it's not about trying to change the physical circumstance, but rather it's about almost changing your polarity, changing the way that you see yourself and changing the way that you see the world so that the way that you see the world aligns with what you want rather than what you don't want. Because you can't run from your own frequency, in a sense. You can lie to yourself as much as you want, but you can't lie to the way that you feel, to the thoughts that you allow to permeate within your mind. So in saying that, it's just about recognizing that regardless No matter who you are, no matter what your circumstances are, you attract what you are. So in trying to change any physical circumstance, it's about changing who you are, and that naturally changes what you attract. Because we can't control anything outside of ourselves. We can only control the internal, not the external. Because I can't add a single hair to my head. We can influence the external. There are certain actions I could take that could influence what's around me, but I can't truly control everything. The only thing that I have full control over is my internals, is myself. And in saying that, it's just about recognizing that, you attract what you are. So then if you become different, if you change, if you transform, which is very possible, it's just about changing the way that you feel and changing the way that you think. Not in a sense of forcing it, but rather in the sense of flowing with it. If you change who you are, then you change the things that you attract towards yourself. If you change the way that you see and you feel about the world, the change that you see and feel about yourself, then you'll attract different things into your life. Just like a magnet, different things will begin to stick and different things are going to repel. So it's just about recognizing that we attract what we are. The Bible verse I have for this video is taken from Proverbs 23, verse 7 to 8. And it says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so he is. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. The morsel you have eaten, you will vomit up and waste your pleasant words." So regardless of who we are, the way that we think in our hearts is who we are. And who we are directly relates to the things that we allow and the things that almost stick within our lives. So then in trying to change any physical circumstance, regardless of what it is, it's first about changing the way that you see yourself and then changing the way that you see the world. And deeper than that, the way that you feel about yourself and the way that you feel about the world. I hope you took something from this video, and thank you for watching.